Hola, buenas noches. Vamos a iniciar la actividad de hoy. Muchas gracias a todos y a todas por venir a esta actividad que organizamos en conjunto con el CEAC y con la Maestría de Historia y Crítica de la Arquitectura. Hola, buenas noches. Hoy tenemos el privilegio de recibir al historiador italiano Daniele Pisani. Le agradecemos mucho su visita, quien está dictando el seminario en la Maestría. Antes de avanzar con la presentación de hoy, me gustaría comentarles un poco las otras actividades que estamos llevando adelante desde el CEAC. Por un lado, la semana pasada inauguramos esta exhibición, Foodscapes, que va a estar abierta y disponible a ser visitada los próximos 2 meses. La exhibición está en el centro del taller de arquitectura, en el segundo piso del edificio del Porta. Esta muestra, curada por Eduardo Castillo Vinuesa y Manuel Ocaña, es parte de lo que fue el pabellón español en la Universidad de Venecia del año pasado. Es una exhibición que trabaja sobre el paisaje que construye nuestra relación con los alimentos. Les recomiendo a todos que la visiten. Tiene una parte audiovisual especialmente fuerte, que dura más o menos unos 55 minutos, así que si en algún momento pasan y se pueden hacer el tiempo, las películas son realmente buenas. Esta exhibición estuvo acompañada de un programa público que desarrollamos los últimos 10 días de 3 conferencias. Esas conferencias, como todas las actividades del CEAC, estarán pronto disponibles en YouTube. De hecho, les vamos a dar prioridad a estas charlas, ya que, por ejemplo, está la charla de Eduardo Castillo Vinuesa, el curador, y es una buena hoja de ruta para visitar la exhibición. Bueno, eso por un lado. Por el otro, quería aprovechar que hoy hay muchos historiadores y hay estudiantes afines a la historia, para invitarlos a la próxima actividad del CEAC, que se desarrollará de aquí a 2 semanas. Vamos a recibir a la historiadora estadounidense Chantal Blakely, que va a estar presentando su libro sobre Marcos Sanuso. La presentación de ella va a ser específicamente sobre la obra de Sanuso en Merlo, acá en la provincia de Buenos Aires, en zona oeste. Sanuso desarrolló una fábrica aquí para Olivetti, muy famosa por esta conjunción entre sistemas estructurales y sistemas termomecánicos de ventilación. Bueno, Chantal va a estar profundizando un poco en este edificio, en la obra de Sanuso, en la obra arquitectónica de Olivetti en general, así que quedan todos cordialmente invitados. Y por si no lo tienen a esta altura, todas las actividades siempre están disponibles en nuestro calendario semestral, están en los accesos en el aula y se pueden enterar todo por redes sociales, página web y demás. Bueno, ahora, sin más, me gustaría invitarlo a Pancho a que nos cuente un poco por qué está Daniele aquí hoy y que viene entamando la maestría. Gracias, Pancho.
Bueno, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Sí, buena la pregunta. Lo que tengo que decirles es que para mí hoy vamos a estar trabajando dentro de un triángulo que me es muy especial, muy particularmente parte de mis intereses, mis ideas de mi vida. Por empezar, porque en un ángulo del triángulo está Venecia. Y bueno, para mí ha sido muy importante Venecia en mi formación, en los momentos de mi vida, haber estado allí, haber estado participando en la vida universitaria y en un momento que fue realmente determinante. Y nadie que haya tenido el privilegio de vivir un tiempo relativamente largo en Venecia se puede olvidar. Y es algo muy marcante, digamos, en la vida de cada uno. Por un lado eso, digamos, Venecia. Por otro lado, la figura de Paulo Mendes también es una persona muy, sobre todo una persona, aparte de un arquitecto muy querida y muy importante para mí, a quien tuve también el privilegio de conocer y establecer cierta relación de amistad. Pero que al margen de eso, que en definitiva es personal, digamos, la razón por la cual se estableció para mí en una referencia, en un modelo y en realmente una figura extremadamente significativa, que bastante después fue reconocida a nivel internacional con Pritzker. Pero más allá de todo eso, siempre para mí Paulo Mendes implicó la figura de un arquitecto que mostraba que era posible y que era necesario, además, articular la práctica de la arquitectura con la cultura, con el conocimiento de la historia, con el conocimiento de la filosofía y mucho más allá, y con el compromiso ético y político. En ese sentido, Paulo Mendes siempre fue para mí, desde que supe de su existencia, realmente una referencia, un ejemplo. Entonces, este es el segundo vértice del triángulo. Y para mi grata sorpresa, en el año 2014, yo fui invitado por la revista Isabela a escribir una recensión que se transformó en un ensayo, en realidad, sobre un libro que se acababa de publicar sobre Paulo Mendes da Rocha. El autor de ese libro era Daniele Pisani. Y el libro me impresionó. Yo comentaba el otro día en el curso que está dando Daniele que yo venía de tener una experiencia bastante desagradable antes, en un doctorado en el cual se había presentado una tesis sobre Paulo Mendes y tuve la desgracia de tener que votar su desaprobación. Fue bastante, confieso, digamos, fue una cosa desaprobar una materia y otra cosa desaprobar un doctorado. Y entonces venía con esa experiencia amarga antes de este libro. Y cuando leí el libro, digo, uno podría decir que me caí de espalda, porque me impresionó por su rigor, me impresionó porque también era un modelo en el cual se articulaba una aproximación sofisticada, culta al tema, amplia, compleja, con un detalle, con una vocación de ver las cosas, de entender los proyectos y de aclararlos, que es inusual esa dupla. A veces los trabajos son muy interesantes desde el punto de vista teórico, pero muy lejos de la práctica y de las concretas manifestaciones de la arquitectura, y a veces lo contrario, ¿no? Y esta conjunción, este equilibrio es raro, y cuando uno lo encuentra, y más lo encuentra en referencia a una figura tan significativa como la de Paulo Mendes, para mí fue una extraordinaria sorpresa. Así que yo escribí eso y destaco, estaba leyendo esta tarde lo que escribí en 2014, que se publicó después en el número 845 de enero de 2015, que algo que yo destacaba ahí, y me parece que está en la raíz también de la aproximación de lo que nos va a decir probablemente Daniele, es que hasta entonces, incluso el Pritzker mismo se le otorgó a Mendes en su carácter de brasileño, en su carácter de un personaje que era periférico y que aún con su pobreza de recursos lograba hacer una cosa fantástica. Y a mí me parecía que eso era falso, que no era cierto, que eso es lo que le interesaba hacer a los media internacionales, construir esa figura, ¿no? El tipo aislado allá que hace una cosa fantástica, pero claro, en pocos medios, etc. Entonces en ese momento yo recuerdo que tomé el trabajo, ahora es fácil, por ejemplo, contestar eso, porque entre otras cosas Brasil es la octava potencia mundial, ahí, digamos, tendrá problemas, pero es difícil identificarlo con un país de la pobreza. Por supuesto que hay pobreza, pero también hay esta otra cosa, que es una enorme potencia internacional en todo sentido. Y en aquel momento, yo me tuve el trabajo de fijarme ciertos índices, y por ejemplo, vi que entre el 96 y el 2010, Brasil había publicado 325.549 escritos, papers científicos. Pero Suiza había publicado 303.427 papers científicos y Bélgica, por ejemplo, 205.000 aproximadamente papers científicos. Y nadie dice que Bélgica o Suiza son países atrasados científicamente respecto de Brasil. Sin embargo, bueno, esto es lo que está pasando. Es decir, ¿por qué digo esto? Porque la mirada de Daniele es justamente una mirada, fue en ese momento una mirada compleja, donde había muchos matices incluso en la obra misma de Mendes. Pero tampoco era condescendiente con la obra de ese texto. Era un texto que señalaba sus lagunas, sus problemas, y cómo en todo caso encaraba en distintos momentos de su vida esas lagunas, esos problemas, cómo los resolvía, en todo caso, o no los resolvía, cómo se abría de un tipo de mirada por ahí al principio de su carrera a otras miradas más complejas y demás. Es un libro realmente de un enorme valor. Así que eso es el tercer vértice del triángulo, por lo cual para mí es un gran gusto que hoy Daniele Pisani, el autor de ese libro que me fascinó, hable de Mendes y de Venecia. Recibamos a Daniele Pisani.
Yes. Thank you. So, good. Can you hear me? Is okay? Yes? Okay, so thank you, Javier. Thank you, Pancho, for your words and for inviting me here. And what am I trying to do this evening? I'm trying to do something at least quite bold, maybe. The answer I am trying to answer is, what is Mendes da Rocha's work about? So, very much. a very bold attempt, and maybe a very difficult one. What do I mean when I say this? I think that many of us know many of the most famous, important works by Paulo Mendes da Rocha, just like the Brazilian Pavilion in Osaka, some of his houses, I don't know, the Cappella di San Pedro, the Fiespi in São Paulo, or Passo do Patriarca, Movie, maybe his masterwork. When I had spent more or less 5-6 years studying his works, his projects, his ideas, and then I wrote the book Pancho, this is interesting, Paulo, I said. Pancho has spoken about, which is this one who was published in 2014, 2015 in Italian, in English, and in Portuguese. And then I also curated a big exhibition in Milan at the Triennale, but it was in that very moment that this question became so important to me. I had already written my big book, and I had also curated the exhibition, but I was not, totally satisfied, because I wanted to write something like a much more personal account about his work. In fact, I knew a very precious material, very well. I must tell you this for you to understand. A few years after my knowledge with Paulo Mendes da Rocha, one day he gave me the keys of his office, And so I could go there, not just to use internet or because it was raining, but I could go there on Sunday to open the drawers and watch a certain drawing and bring it home. And so the next day I could go to scan it, for example. So I was very, very lucky, something I think maybe almost unique, because I had that totally freedom to use, to see, to the sources. When I say office, I mean archive, because all of the drawings were there. So, yes, I had written a book, but there was something more I wanted to talk about, and especially there were some kind of sources I hadn't used maybe enough. Okay, I had already used the drawings. I had spoken to him for thousands of hours. But, well, if some of you has gone there, his office was a very strange place with very strange objects. It was a strange universe where everything was had a sort of coherence. So one day, after publishing my book, I decided to write one more book. And which kind of book? I had already talked about his project, his career, all of this. So I wanted to write, I told you, a more personal account, but which kind of account? My attempt was to make a sort of, here I say, a cross-section of his imagination. So something very, I told, bold and difficult, and also very dangerous, of course. Decide what is the core of a whole production. If some of you comes to me and tell me, I would like to do this, I would say, no, you can't. It's not allowed. I tried to do it because I had been searching his work for 6-7 years, and even in this case, it's very difficult and very dangerous. But I thought that this was the only way to answer my question: what is Mendes da Rocha's work about? So, what did I do to try to understand what is the beating heart of his work? Of course, I am a historian, so I needed to frame my research, to choose a much more specific issue in a way, and use my toolbox. As an historian, I use clues, I use tracks, proofs, and I use especially philology. So I needed to, so to say, to catch him in the act. Where and how? Maybe the image of the book I have written is the Matryoshka. I mean, different dolls of different size, one inside the other one. So I choose a project. I use this project to put some questions. I use this question to put more questions, and so on. So the point of departure was here. It was on the other side of the Rio de la Plata, and it was in Montevideo. Why Montevideo? Because of a proposal by Mendes da Rocha for the Montevideo Bay. I have to say that for me it's not a good project by him. For me, the importance is not the project. You are going to see that it's his words about this project that interested me. But in my opinion, this is not one of his main projects. In 1998, he was invited to Montevideo for a workshop at the Universidad Nacional, together with other architects. And this is almost the only panel we have which contains the different works of the different students. So this is not Mendes da Rocha's work. This is the work of the students. And we have a very little amount of documents about this proposal. We have these drawings, very simple ones. Here you can see the bay as it was before the proposed intervention. Here you have the bay after the proposed intervention. It's a very, for me, very schematic proposal. For me, it doesn't work so well. And then we have just two drawings. So I am showing you all we know about this proposal. I call it proposal because it is not a real project. He went there to Montevideo, came back home, and in a few hours he made a couple of drawings. So I cannot call it a really project. This is one of the drawings. This one is held in Beaubourg in Paris, and this is the front, where you can see the shape, the reshaped bay, almost square. Here you have the center of the city. Here there is a new pier. Here there is the cemetery. And look at here, this theater, that is the main point in Mendes da Rocha's project. Here you can see the back. The back are drawings of the theater. And then we have a second drawing. This one, which is very funny for me, because this is a drawing that he made for me. So it is in my home, and I like it very much because here it is on the other side of a recipe for a chocolate cake. And one more time, it's a drawing, it's a sketch of here, this is the island. This is a roof that he wanted to build. But as you can see, it's a very vague proposal. It is, however, quite clear that the main focus is the theater. So I was speaking about the theater that he thought that could have been built in an island in the Montevideo Bay, which is called Isla Liberdad or Isla de las Ratas, and that you can see here in these photos. But why? So I told you that for me is not one of his best projects. So why do I want to start here? It is because of his words. When he used to speak about this project. I'm going to read a few sentences by him about this project. There are many others, but I think that these are enough for you to make yourself an idea. After with this project, the bay will be, he says, quite a Venetian. Now, will be quite a Venetian perspective on the relation between man and nature. Another time, he says, and so a sort of water piazza could arise, the variation of the possibility of a Venezia for Latin America. One more time, a square water piazza. In the little eccentric island, in this new geography, a theater, learning from Venice or lessons from Venice. And then, finally, in the bay, in a magnificent eccentric position, eccentric meaning that it is not in the center, there is a little island, which is transformed in the Venetian way in a theater. This sentence for me was extraordinary because, well, I live in Venice, and I can tell you that in Venice, I have never seen a little island which is transformed in the Venetian way in a theater. So this was the point. Why? And I know that he had gone to Venice very many times. He knew very well Venice. So why, not once, but 20 times, he said something that is apparently wrong. It doesn't make sense. So this was the departure of my investigation, a contradiction, or apparently a contradiction, or something I could not understand. So, a little island which is transformed in the Venetian way in a theater. And, well, this theater seems to him very important. A friend of mine gave me this photo. We are in Venice at the Biennale, and there is Paulo Mendes da Rocha who is handling the theater, trying, maybe I was not there, but maybe to explain the meaning of his project to Snozzi and a professor of the UAV. And so what it seems that we have to focus more than on the whole proposal on the theater, and even more on his words than on the theater itself, even because we don't know so much about the theater itself. So let's try to do it. And remember that we have to do it with our historian's toolbox, which is philology. So what did he mean with such words? Well, let's go to Venice. And let's pay attention especially to this place in Venice, which is the most important one. I don't know how much you know Venice, but here you can see Piazza San Marco, which is the most important square in Venezia. But maybe the most important place of the city is this one. It is called Bacino Marciano, and it is the water in front of the square. Here we have a very important island. We will see it very many times. And so pay attention to this place, which is the very center of Venice. And which theaters do we have in Venice that could correspond to Paulo Mendes da Rocha's words? Well, here, you can see it here. This is called Isola di San Giorgio Maggiore. Here there is actually a theater. It's called Teatro Verde, but it's not an island transformed in the Venetian way in a theater. It is just a theater in an island. It is something much more normal than what we are expecting. So no, this is not our candidate. Venice and the theater, you could write 10 books about this history. In 1979, for example, Aldo Rossi designed and built his Teatro del Mondo for Venice. And the Teatro del Mondo docked very near the place where we are talking about, the Bacino Marciano. But, of course, this has nothing to do with Paulo Mendes da Rocha and the idea of an island transformed in the Venetian way in a theater. But the place is always this one, the Bacino Marciano. Here you can see Piazza San Marco, San Giorgio, and one more time, Piazza San Marco. Here, this is the place of where the Teatro del Mondo, Aldo Rossi's Teatro del Mondo, docked. And here on the left we have San Giorgio Maggiore. And it is a very long history. I cannot try to talk with you about it. But the idea of Teatro del Mondo is something that comes from the 16th century, when some Teatri del Mondo, theaters of the world, used to go in the Canal Grande and arriving to Piazza San Marco. Here there was the arrival of this Teatro del Mondo. So here, this is the same place. you can look at this lion that you can remember. So you can recognize it here too. This is San Giorgio, and this is Piazza San Marco. There are very many other theatrical events on the Bacino Marciano. In 1989, there was an enormous concert of Pink Floyd, always in that very same place, but of course, it has nothing to do with us. The only possible answer I could find, which is, what was Paulo Mendes da Rocha talking about when he spoke about an island transforming the Venetian way in a theater, is a very strange proposal dating back from the 16th century. The author was a writer and farmer, Alvise Cornaro, who about 1560 made a very strange proposal. We just have a text. This reconstruction, I will tell you in a few minutes where it comes from. And this proposal was to create in Bacino Marciano, Piazza San Marco, San Giorgio, Punta della Dogana, Teatro del Mondo by Aldo Rossi, 3 new presences. So this strange artificial island, a fountain here, and third here, a theater. And here we know that there were some sandbanks, so maybe this could be interpreted as a theater, an island transforming the Venetian way in an island. But maybe, I don't say that things are like this. I am saying that this is the only possibility I can see. Where did I take this image from? I took it from this book by Manfredo Tafuri. Pancho has already talked about him and his importance for him when he was young in the 70s, 80s. And in 1995, Manfredo Tafuri wrote a book about Venice, a very important book. In this book, we have that image. So, and second element, Paulo Mendes da Rocha loved very much Tafuri's work. He had this book about Venice with a text by Manfredo Tafuri. And even more interesting, he had this book about Manfredo Tafuri, one of his most important ones, that has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with Venice. But one day I discovered that this book was protected in a box that he had done with Paulo Mendes da Rocha, with his hands. And in the cover of this book that has nothing to do with Venice, there is the lion of Piazza San Marco. So it's a sort of delirious genealogy, maybe. But it tells something that for Paulo Mendes da Rocha, thinking of Tafuri is in a way thinking of Venice. You have to know that Manfredo Tafuri was professor of history of architecture in Venice for about 30 years or something like that. So and was a great researcher about the history of Venice. So this is not such a strange deformation. We have also other clues that maybe don't prove, but indicate that in Mendes da Rocha's hand had Venice's and Tafuri tending to coincide. This is the inviting letter to Paulo Mendes da Rocha in 2014 to a congress about Tafuri. There is also the Torquato di Tella name and Pancho's name, but there are very many pages about this document in my book. But today I cannot talk about it. But I just want to say that when invited to talk about Venice, to talk about Tafuri, Paulo Mendes da Rocha decided to talk about Venice. And one more time, one of his annotations is see Tafuri's book or text about Venice, but which text? Venezia Rinascimento or another one? So, did Mendes da Rocha know Cornaro's project? Well, the truth is that I don't know. There are some interesting and fascinating clues, maybe. But if we think it a little bit better, maybe the question if it is Cornaro's, if Cornaro is Paulo Mendes da Rocha's source, in my opinion, if you go on, if you reflect about it, it is not a good question. Because, well, it's very fascinating. The lion, this postcard Paulo Mendes da Rocha sent to his future husband with the very same lion, which is the place of the Teatro del Mondo, and so on. But, well, all of this proves nothing, and maybe this is not the good question. Maybe this is a false problem, because let's say that we can prove that he read Tafuri's book, and so what do we have? What good will do it to us? Would it be very useful? Because Mendes da Rocha is not an architect who was used to quote, to copy, to make quotations from the past. So yes, and here we are dealing with something very complex, with imagination, with memory. You don't go pick something from the past because you have to need it, if you are Paulo Mendes da Rocha at least. Maybe we could admit that Cornaro's proposal, yes, may have initiated a chain of associations, but just that. And we never be sure about it. So we are in a sort of dead end. We have tried one path, but I think that we didn't reach the desired destination. So let's try another path. And let's ask ourselves what Venice means for Paulo Mendes da Rocha. Just a moment. And this is a much easier question to answer, because Venice was almost a sort of obsession for him. Obsession is quite negative. I don't want to say that. But he used to talk about Venice. And what does he say about Venice? So let's look for some of his sentences about Venice. This one, for me, is very interesting. I will read it in English. Venezia is a very interesting example to me. Venezia praised not because of its palaces' beauty, but seen as a new geography. Its great beauty is exactly what is revealed by this episode. The Venezia Lagoon was the most inadvisable place to raise a city, a port. It was necessary to map out new designs, configuring perfectly the canals and their banks to border the small islands that dotted the water, to employ techniques and to make experiments never before applied on such a grand scale. Later, the palaces were built to make the city's beauty stand out, as if someone wished to praise his own work. So it's quite a poetical interpretation of Venice's history, but as we are going to see, it makes sense in a way. So what does it really say with these words? It says, yes, of course, I like it. Venice is beautiful, I admit it. But what he really says is that, well, I like it. I like Piazza San Marco, I like Palazzo Ducale, I like San Giorgio Maggiore, I like very many palaces, and so on. But what really interests me in Venice is what is before these masterworks. It's what lies behind. It's maybe the most important expression is here, a new geography. So the construction of the territory where the buildings will eventually be constructed, but not just the buildings, the territory, and then also the buildings, both together. So if we try to understand what Paulo Mendes da Rocha thinks when he talks about Venice, this is not the right photo. Maybe this is the right photo, but together with this one. This one, which is, well, of course, I cannot show you how the lagoon was 2,000 years ago. I have no photo, I have no drawing, I have nothing. But if we try to imagine what it was something that now I'm going to try to explain to you. In general, we tend to think that I go here and then I come back. That Venice is a big island cut by canals. But this is maybe a sensation, but this is not Venice's history. It is the actual opposite. If we consider such a drawing dating back from the start of the 16th century, to understand how Venice grew along the centuries, we have not to look at the main highlands, but we have to take some of the secondary ones and to think that in the start, over there were no highlands. There were just a few sandbanks. In some of them, some buildings were constructed. Then every island grew up, became bigger, and then, in a way, all of them fill the space between them. So now we see a one big island cut in some places, but we have to imagine that the process was the opposite. It was not by subtraction, and rather by addition that Venice was built. So almost the whole territory is artificial, is made by man. So when we think about this past, so it's impossible. I am proposing some recent photos of the most abandoned places in the lagoon. We have to think about something like that. Piazza San Marco has been built in a place that 1,500 years ago was something like that. I don't know exactly how it was, but something like that. Or that. These are photos of the most far places in the lagoon. And let's go back to Paulo Mendes da Rocha. And if you think about the text I have read, he's saying, yes, I like San Giorgio, I like these wonderful buildings, but for me, what is most extraordinary in Venice history is the construction of territory. Then, year myths later, the palaces were built to make the city's beauty stand out, as if someone wished to praise his own work. But for me, what is before all of this is even more important. And is referring especially to the foundations of Venice, which is almost completely built on wood piles. So let's look for other texts by Tafuri about Venice to check if we are totally misunderstanding his thought. Here he says, Venice is not a complex of palaces or buildings. First and foremost, Venice is a sublime manifestation of the human will in relation to nature, and in particular against the hardships of nature. Yes, it fits with the first quotation I did. And maybe now we have a path to go back to his sentences about Montevideo. Because here he says, Venice is a sublime manifestation of the human will in relation to nature. Here he's saying Venice is a particular case of something much more general, something completely general. Human will in relation to nature. So sentences like this, in my opinion, begin to make sense. So a sort of water piazza would arise, the variation of the possibility of Venice for Latin America, or a square water piazza in the little eccentric island in this new geography of theater, learning from Venice, lessons from Venice. Maybe the most important point in these sentences is the idea that Venice is a sort of, I use the word paradigm. For paradigm, I mean what Giorgio Agamben says. The paradigm is a single case isolated from the context of which it is part, only to the extent that it, exhibiting its singularity, makes intelligible a new whole whose homogeneity it builds. I know it's quite complicated. I make a proposal today, then maybe if you one day will read my book, you will have the time to reflect about this with more time. But maybe we could say that paradigm is not exactly the same meaning, but we could say also example, or yes, example maybe is the right word. Venice as an example, as a model, to be not copied, but that indicates something important. Sorry. Where does this idea come from? Well, we are not the time to reconstruct Mendes da Rocha's experiences. Of course, something very important for him was the figure of his father. His father was an engineer specialized in the construction of ports and dams. From his father, for sure, he took the idea that nature is something that you have to transform in order to make it better for man. And we also have to consider Brazilian architecture in the age. Mendes da Rocha was starting to be a professional. In the last 50s, Brazilian was being constructed. So this idea of nature as something that needs human intervention so to become a home for man was something around him when he was 30 years old or something like that. But for me, the most important element in all of this story, Pancho has told about the political and social commitment of Paulo Mendes da Rocha. This is a very important side of not just of his thought, but of his architecture. And we have to frame this idea of this optimism towards the transformation of nature. In my book, I used the word, the expression cosmopoiesis, the idea of constructing a better world, but framed to the current Brazil of the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, which was, especially in the 70s and 80s, one of the most unjust places in the world, and a huge and terrible example of destruction of nature. Here we have photos dating back from the years of the military junta, but it will be very easy. Now, I'm going to show you a few photos, more recent photos. And this, for me, is very important because one of the most frequent, typical sentences he used to say in the last years of his life was "Estamos na rota do desastre." We are on the path to disaster. So his optimism lived together with a terrible conscience of the problems, the nightmare of the destruction of nature. So I think that this is very important to try to understand his position. Yeah, I wrote, these are photos of the queimadas of the Bolsonaro years. And we may say maybe that Mendes da Rocha is a very strange figure because here I said maybe it's also almost a provocation, but a sort of desarrollista, but too aware of the disasters produced in the name of progress. So there was this idea of this optimism towards man's capabilities in changing the world, but at the same time, there was the conscience of the disaster that were being made. And if you ask me what all of this has to do with architecture, I answer that this not just has to do with his architecture, but all of this is Mendes da Rocha's architecture. If we consider his projects, we will easily see that, his aim was, here he says, a planet which is inhabited and modified as a new nature. And if we consider his project, his works, they were all examples of how man should use his knowledges, which in his case means especially technique. He was a very great, he had an incredible structural knowledge, but this was not the end. This was the means. Technique was the means, and which was the goal? The goal was to make projects intended as example of how architecture should transform nature in order to build what he used to call a cidade para todos, the city for all. And I think this is here that Venice is so important, because to him, Venice is the most important example of that what comes before first is transforming nature in order to build the city for the man. Maybe something very vague, maybe without enough political content. But in my opinion, when he used to say that he was interested in quite a Venetian perspective on the relation between man and nature, he was thinking about works just like the movie. This is his Venetian perspective about man and nature, which means using technique, constructing a sort of artificial nature to build the city for the man to live. A new geography, an artificial world, but for a richer life for the man. Well, it's it. I'm sorry, it's very short, but we can discuss maybe.
Gracias, Daniele, por la presentación. Sí, ahora estamos abiertos a conversar. Of course, preguntas, comentarios. Lo primero que me venía ¿está bien en español o en inglés?
No, español, no, but it's the same. You can also speak in Spanish. Okay, as you prefer. But I can understand. Also for you, I can understand the Spanish. So if you want to ask in Spanish.
No, I mean, especially in the last bit, when you said technology is the means, what is the end? Because inevitably not to think of Niemeyer and of this tradition of Brazilian architects who have an access to great engineering feats, but that they silence them. No one speaks about Niemeyer's relation to technique because his work is often something else. No, it's I don't know, the whether it's a form or
Mm-hmm.
So what do you stand out specifically of Paulo Mendes? And I'm asking because I know that you have written about other contemporary architects.
In my opinion, Niemeyer on one side and Mendes da Rocha or Artigas on the other side have two very different ideas of technology. Niemeyer thought of himself as a sort of genius, as an artist, as a sculptor, and so the shapes came first, and the engineer had to make them possible. Joaquim Cardoso was an incredible engineer and poet, incredible figure in 20th century history of architecture and engineering. He used to say that, and he accepted this role. In Mendes da Rocha's case, it is the opposite. Is one of the most typical sentences by him was, you can imagine just what you know how to build. This is a very rich, in my opinion, idea, because it seems something that an engineer could have told, but it's not that. It means that if you know how things work, you are free, because it doesn't come in a second moment, an engineer that tells you, no, you cannot do this, you have to put 2 pilasters here, 2 pillars here, and make it different. You introduce the difficulty from the very first moment, and then you are free, you can live free your imagination. So the structural element point is present in Paulo Mendes da Rocha's project from the very beginning. It's one condition. If we make a drawings, he knows that that beam will have to be 2.5 meters tall, and it is correct. I have listened to very many testimonies of his incredible structural imagination in a way. So for Niemeyer, the structure was a problem, and there was something else who had to resolve this problem. For Paulo Mendes da Rocha, it was not a problem. It was a resource, something that needed to be taken into account from the very beginning. And then, of course, also Niemeyer was able to understand how structure functions, of course, but it was not part of his work, in his opinion. So it's two very different ways of facing the project. This is interesting.
Sí, quería preguntar, Daniele, quería preguntarte, es muy simple la pregunta, ¿cómo ubicás, el Pritzker a Mendes da Rocha fue en 2006, si no me equivoco, ¿no?
Sí.
Y han pasado 20 años, más o menos, casi. ¿Cómo ubicás la arquitectura de Mendes da Rocha hoy? Una pregunta que podría esconderse detrás, ¿sería premiado por el Pritzker? Y la otra pregunta que me surge, también vinculada en el otro sentido, es, ¿diría que es anacrónico el planteo que hacía?
Non l'ho capita bene, per favore, Pancio, sorry.
Sì, allora...
Sorry.
Italiano.
Sì, no, sorry.
L'ho fatto prima in spagnolo.
Ok, sorry.
Dunque, basicamente la domanda è come consideri tu il rapporto fra le proposte di Mendes da Rocha in riguardo ai dibattiti contemporanei, e se ti sembra che sia, cioè, potresti dire che sia anacronica la posizione sua?
Sì. Yes. Thank you also for the translation. And yes, I think so. If you ask me if I think that is anachronic, I agree, but maybe this is why it is so important. I mean that we used to discuss about let's take, I don't know if you know the movie, which is maybe his most important work in São Paulo. The idea was the idea that the plot of land should be open to every fluxus of citizens from the city. But just a few years after its construction, the plot of land was closed, totally closed. So now you can enter just through one single door. And this has changed completely the meaning, the use and the meaning.
So I think your microphone is
yes.
running out of battery.
Yes. Let's change. Okay, yes, I think it's better. So the work was maintained in good conditions, but the use and the meaning of the work completely changed. And I discussed about this with him very many times, because I used to tell Paulo, but you go on thinking about your project as open to the city. But if you do this in São Paulo in 2015, what it happens is that the clients, few days after the inauguration, will close because they fear the homeless and so on that go there to sleep during the night. So, don't you think that well, I try to be very polite, but I needed his answer, and his answer was more or less, I know, I am not stupid, because he was very many things, but he was not stupid. He was a very intelligent man, but I do it exactly because I know that what I do is needed exactly because I want to show what should be and is not possible now. So I think that he was conscious that his idea of architecture was and had to be, in a way, anachronic. And maybe it's one of his strengths, and also one of the reasons why it was not understood. He won the Pritzker by chance. No one made an idea about his work, I think, when he won the Pritzker. Yes, please.
Being younger and having met the trajectory, having met him personally, Paulo was one of the few architects to receive all possible awards.
Yes.
Being alive.
Yes.
The Venice Lion, the Riva, the Pritzker. So saying that someone that receives the Pritzker is misunderstood, can we explain that?
Yes, this is a good point.
Strange. We're speaking about he was the greatest living architect.
But
5 years ago,
yeah, yes. But I think that in 2015, 2020, he became to be a famous figure. Even if, let's remember that he built just a very few works, about 80, 90 buildings in a 60 years career. So he built a very little amount of buildings. And all of them were in Brazil, except the Osaka Pavilion and one building, no, the Museo dos Coches, but in the Slaviers, but very late. And then there is 20 years ago, something like that, a very another little building in Madrid with another architect that did
the white one.
Yes, but has nothing to do with him. So his whole production was in Brazil and almost all in São Paulo. And I think that when he won the prize, the Pritzker, I don't know. I never studied the members of the prize in that moment because well, it was not so interesting for me, but it could be interesting. But it was not so interesting from my point of view. I think that later in 2015 to 2020, yes, there was a much bigger attention in his work. Maybe the Pritzker was what began a process of universal knowledge about, but he received very many prizes, but when I talk with my students in Italy, he's not so famous. They don't know him. So maybe here in Latin America, for many of you, is one of the big guys, and also for me. But from a European perspective, I don't think so. I think that it's just much less famous and recognized than it seems. Wow.
Thank you, first of all, for your wonderful talk. Coming back to the issue of the engineering, how much of what about Auguste Perret mentality instead of focusing in Scuola Paulista on his conception of the relationship between concrete and engineering through
Yes.
direct figure.
Yes, but I think that yes, it makes sense what you say, and it makes sense especially when we talk about João Batista Villanova Artigas. One of the most famous sentences of João Batista Villanova Artigas was tem que fazer cantar o ponto de apoio. You have to make the ponto de apoio. Ecco, thank you. Sing, which was a sentence by Perret. So, yes, of course. I think that this is true also for Paulo Mendes da Rocha, but I also think that, in the common sense, Paulo Mendes da Rocha is considered as a sort of depending on Artigas. Artigas as the depending the master and the but I think it's more complicated. When Paulo Mendes da Rocha made his first important work, the Clube Atlético Paulistano, he was 30 years old, and Artigas in that moment was not Artigas yet. And they meet 1-2 years later when Paulo becomes Artigas' assistant, teacher assistant at the university. In my opinion, the idea of structure in Paulo Mendes da Rocha doesn't come from Artigas, but it comes from Reggi. Afonso Eduardo Reggi, the Carioca architect, author, especially the most important work from this point of view is the MAM in Rio de Janeiro, the Museo di Arte Moderna, which was a work that Paulo Mendes da Rocha and his colleagues, students at the Mackenzie in the first 50s, they loved this project. I have found interviews with Paulo Pedro de Melo de Saraiva, Fabio Penteado, all his friends when he was a student, that used to say, for us, the most important architect in Brazil was Afonso Eduardo Reggi. And I think that his idea of structure comes more from Reggi than from Artigas. But yes, doesn't mean that there's nothing to do with Perret, of course. But more than Artigas, I think that it is very Reggi. Okay, no, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, how much Perret in the Brazilian architectural culture?
In general, I think in São Paulo very strong. A
sort of polytechnic.
Yes, polytechnical formation. Yes.
And the idea of the concrete betonarme.
Sì.
Armado visto, no?
Sì.
So, how much is this combination
in São Paulo is fundamental.
Structure, Viollet-le-Duc, idea.
Sì, much more São Paulo than Rio de Janeiro because of its polytechnical formation. Until 1947, there was no architecture faculty in São Paulo. You have Artigas didn't study architecture, he studied. Well, yes, it was architecture, but inside an engineer faculty. So, yes.
So, nothing to do, or perhaps it has to do with it, but what could you say about say to us, all of us, about the paradoxical relationship between Paulo Mendes and the dictatorship?
Yes.
It's a
yes.
point.
Yes. So Paulo Mendes da Rocha was no communist, was leftish, of course, but he was no communist. And for me, it was very surprising. It took a long time to try to understand something about his situation during the military junta. So especially between, it started in 1964, but it became really very violent, especially in 1969. And Paulo used to say something that clearly was not true. And this was that in 1969, I was forbidden to make architecture. And I thought, well, you were forbidden, but you went on constructing buildings. So, no, it's before, but there are very many houses. There is the Stadio Serra Dourada. So, how is it possible? And then, but it was very complicated. Then I understood that I found, thanks to the help of a woman working in a library, in a public library, that she gave me some official documents dating back from 1969, and that were the rules personally against Artigas and Paulo Mendes da Rocha. In 1969, just after the Atto Istituzionale numero 5, the rules that transformed Brazil into a real dictatorship. You cannot meet other persons, the Congress has no stance, and anything else. And a few months after that, there are 3 rules with a list of names. The first one says that Artigas is demitted from the university. The second one says that Artigas and 30 more professors from the USP. Then a second, almost identical rule that says that Paulo Mendes da Rocha and 10 other people are demitted from the university. And then there is a third one, the most interesting one, that says that in every moment the president can, I don't know how to say it in English, but can break the contract between Paulo Mendes da Rocha and the client. So he could sign a project with the municipality of Buenos Aires, no, of São Paulo, and without a reason, they could decide not to respect this contract. Demitted from the university was already something heavy, because it meant that he didn't have anymore the money. And for an architect who had 5 sons and used to build 1-2 buildings per year, well, without that money, it was difficult. But this third rule was very hard for him, because it became a problem for the clients. So why should I ask you to build something if then one day someone can decide that you're not the right guy? This is why many of the projects of the 70s that we know are his projects were not signed by him. For example, the Stadio Serra Dourada, he was the architect, 100%. But if you read the paper, the drawings, you cannot find his name. And it is the same for a very important project in São Paulo, together with Artigas and Fabio Penteado, the housing. There is no Paulo Mendes da Rocha's name. I think that they were friends, so he said, no, please don't put my name because it's dangerous. Then we divide the money, not in 2 parts, but in 3 parts. but don't put my name because it's dangerous for all of us. But it was not just a question of money. It was much. I have to tell you. So, two important things. The first one is why he, who was not a communist, was, let's say, was not forbidden, but why against him? Because a few years before, about 1967, he was one of the he has been elected in the most important I don't know how to say in Italian, so it's very complicated. Each faculty had not students, all the some professor of all the faculties of the University of São Paulo. So it was the main council. Thank you. He was there, and the rector wanted to not to complete the construction of Artigas FAUSP, and wanted to demolish some houses for students inside the campus of the university. And Mendes da Rocha was against it, said it, and he was unlucky because other professor agreed with him. And the other, but a few 2 years later, the rector became the minister of justice that wrote the I-5. So it was a personal revenge against him, that son of a bitch, sorry, who had the courage of making something against me. So it was not because he was a communist, which he wasn't, but because it was him who had done this thing. The worst moment in his life was 69, he used to say, and that is a very strange moment because it is the year when he wins the competition for the Brazilian pavilion. This is, as you say, this is very Itamaraty. You told me about this expression because it's very strange. The same year when he all of this happens, he wins the competition. Why? Because the competition was led by the Instituto de Arquitectos, independent from the government, and of course the government could have said, okay, you have chosen Paulo Mendes da Rocha, but we don't want him, so choose another one. But there was no time to develop another project because it was maybe 3 months before the exhibition. So the government, in a way, was compelled to accept the project. And Paulo always told me that when he went to Japan, he was afraid of being murdered by the government. So he wanted a diplomatic passport because he said to me that he was really, really very afraid in that moment. Then in the 70s, the truth is that I tried to make a calculation how many projects per year, and it doesn't change so much. It's the same as in the 60s or in the 80s. So it's not true that it works less during the dictatorship. This is a myth. But what is true is that he was not anymore a professor at the university, and so I know that his economical condition was difficult. But then, starting from the mid-70s, the Brazilian dictatorship was changing political elections for majors of governors were allowed. So the situation slowly changed, and also his life became much quieter. I don't know. But the very difficult moment was 69.
Bueno, Daniele, I don't know if there's any other comments or questions from the audience. Bueno, I think we can call it a night. Thank you so much, Daniele. Gracias, Pancho. Gracias a todos por venir.
Thank you.